We want to have closure at 9 o'clock for those who you want to. After we take this moral inventory, we go into chapter 6, which is titled Into Action. It does not say get active. It says into action. And the action they're going to describe is what we do with the inventory after we write it all down on paper. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? A question. We have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. Remember what I told you the fourth step inventory was all about? What's been keeping God out of my life? Now it brings it out in black print. We have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. In other words, what has been blocking this God out of my life? We have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. The weak items in our personal inventory are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the fifth step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter, how it works. And it tells us now that this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so, the best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. What warning is this now? Fourth? Here's your fourth warning. If you don't do a fifth step properly, you will drink. It doesn't say, but if I go to AA meetings, that'll cover me. You see how you have to discover what the fellowship is saying versus what the program is saying? We're talking about recovery from alcoholism. Now, if meetings was the answer, everybody who would be attending meetings would never drink again. Do you know, and I don't say this to be controversial, it is a matter of fact, that as many people get drunk going to meetings as those who don't go? Not everybody gets drunk who quits going to meetings. They're going to meetings and they get drunk. But nobody tells you that. They leave you with the idea in your mind that the only reason anybody ever gets drunk is because they quit going to meetings. Why don't we get honest and say, last night I was sitting with John at a meeting and he got drunk when he left? Why don't we say that? Because the truth sometimes hurts. And the fellowship wants to keep it so simple, they want to say, you just keep coming here and you'll be all right. Now, I know for a fact I could stand in my garage from now until the day I die and never turn into a car. But some people say magic occurs here. We are starting to do in AA exactly what I used to criticize my religion for. We're starting to do the same thing. I said about the people who were in my church, yeah, those good religious people, they go to church every day, but they can't live it. Now we're starting to say, no matter what you do, just come to meetings, you will be all right. We're starting to say the same thing. Just come here, everything else is all right. Be careful. The fellowship can hurt you if you don't understand that it's nothing more than a support mechanism. It is not a treatment mechanism. This is perhaps, where did I leave off? Oh, the best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. What does that tell you? You cannot talk about things you don't know about if you don't know about them. That's all right if you're not aware of them. But if you're aware of something in your life and you hold it back, then you did not take in a good fifth step. If I know that I stole $50 and I don't want the other man to think that I'm a thief, so I don't confess to him that I stole $50 from John and I owe him $50, I have not taken a good fifth step because I've held something back. I have not been thorough. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. They didn't relate it. They hid it. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. And if you're afraid to tell another individual the truth about yourself, you're still in the ego. Remember when I went to see Father Gideon here, and I took a fourth and fifth with him? You know what he told me when I was through here? He said, "You're not taking a fifth step, you're bragging. You want to be the most rotten man in AA. You don't even know what the fifth step is all about. You had better leave this room and go find somebody out here in AA who knows what this program is all about and let them help you." And it's true, I was bragging. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. Don't hold anything back because you want to project yourself as a good guy. That's what means incomplete. But if I don't know, if I have stolen $150 from Joe here, and I have totally forgotten that and I don't remember it, I can confess to that. Even though Joe may come up to me and say, "Hey, did you take an inventory?" And I say, "Yes." He said, "Well, you stole $150 from me." And I don't remember it. I have to take his word for it. Because I can't remember. I might have been in a blackout. See? I know a man who led a meeting and he said he left the house with $5 and was gone 3 weeks. And he came home with $500 in his pocket and he doesn't know where he got it. And I stood up and said, "I gave it to you," but he didn't pay me. I figured if he was in a blackout, he couldn't remember I make $500, right? More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. I've seen that in AA. I went through that phase, believe me. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. You know what my stage character when I was first in here and started getting in this program? I walked softly, spoke silently, never used the cuss word, never did anything, and was a picture of voice of quiet and serenity. And one day I was to a meeting in Avon Lake, and an old-timer who came in here in 1940 brought a man across the room to me and said this, "If he can't keep you sober, no one can." Talking about me. And my little actor really took hold. I thought, I have arrived. I was playing a role. If I can't keep him sober, nobody can. And I went home that night and I thought to myself, "You damn fool, what are you doing? You're playing a game again. You know you're not that individual." And I became the real me. What you see is what you get. The outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. That's what's happened to me. I knew I didn't deserve what they were saying to me. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. That's a man who has a reputable reputation in the community. I didn't have that. Do you know the things that me and my buddies did in the bar rooms? We sat down and laughed and joked about it. Psychopathic behavior. And if we didn't sit down and laugh about it and do anything that night, we sure did it before the night was over. There's a lot of things I can subscribe to doing in a bar room as part of the group that I ran with that was against the law, that was illegal, was immoral, and a lot of these other things, and we laughed and joked about it, because when you have abnormal behavior, if you do it long enough, it becomes normal with the group that you're running with. That's why I had to break away from a lot of my old friends. I surely would not come home and tell my family what I was doing. And on a couple of the charges the police picked me up for, my mother asked me point blank, "Son, did you do that?" I said, "No, Mom, you know I wouldn't do that." And she believed me, but I did. And I'd laugh. I would hold my head down and in shame for the questions she asked me, and then I would run out and say, "Did you see what we did last night?" Something's wrong with my life. And that's why it says, as our alcoholism progresses, we look for lower companions. We start doing things that are immoral and everything else and believe because everybody's doing them, they're moral. Have to be careful of that. That's when fears occur. You have a reputation like mine, there's not too much to fear. People start expecting that from you. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we're honest with no one else. Small wonder many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chances for recovery. What are we doing in a fifth step? When we're telling another person our faults, our defects of character, what are we doing? We're humbling ourselves. Well, what's a single word that covers it? Confession? When you think of the early psychiatrists, and they used to show an early psychiatrist, how did you picture a psychiatrist? A person laying on a black couch? A man with a pad and pencil sitting there? What was the man on the couch doing? Confessing. You know what science has discovered? Religions that have confession as part of their religion have a lower incidence of mental illness. Whether it be open confession in a group, private confession in a confessional, whichever way it may be. All right? They find out that people who do this have lower rates of mental illness. They have also witnessed to the fact that since the Catholic Church has taken away its standard of weekly or monthly confessions or regular confessions, mental illness have increased in the Catholic religion also. See? For me to tell you what's wrong with me and ask for forgiveness and make amends has some type of healing effect on my psyche. And that's why AA picked that up and put it in a part of our process. Confession is good for the soul. Didn't you ever hear that? We must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons. You can do it with more than one, with whom we take the intimate and confidential step. Now, my recommendation is this. I don't know how you feel about it, person or persons, but when I get into this intimate step, and I'm going to tell people some of my hidden secrets, I only want one person to know it. Because if I ever go to an AA meeting and I hear John, Joe, Mary, and Jane talking about something out of my life, I want to know how they found out. And if I am sure I only told one person, then I know that he can't be trusted. And if you ever take a step with an individual and you find out that some of the secrets you told that individual have leaked out because that person could not keep his confidence, how do you handle that? I will tell you how one man in the program handled it when I was in here, about 7 or 8 years. He stood up before a group and he said this: I took a 5th step with Joe, and the only man I ever told Joe about these difficulties, the only man I ever told about my difficulties was Joe. And I came to an AA meeting and I heard other people talking about what I told him in confidence. Therefore, I suggest to every person in this room that when he leaves here, he tells other AAs, never take a 5th step with Joe. He cannot keep a confidence. And that will eliminate that immediately. There's not much you can do it after the fact. But if I take a 5th step with 10 people, I have to remember what I told each one and this and that, and if something comes back, I can relate to it. And now this next line is something that AA, some members of AA, refuse to accept. I heard it myself several times. And here's what it says: those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. In other words, they're speaking of religions like Catholicism that have confession. It's telling you to take with the priest. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean it's no good because you did it with a priest? That's all was available when AA first started. There was no fellowship. It doesn't mean you only have to take it with the priest. You know it's confidential. You can do it twice. Now you can take it with another individual in AA. But don't make that an issue. Don't make that a controversy, something to start dealing and discussing and debating about. Follow the directions and do it whichever way makes you happy. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. You'll know that immediately, and I don't think you'll have that problem if you try to follow the process in AA. We have the fellowship today to support us. If we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a close-mouthed, understanding friend. A close-mouthed, understanding friend. You got that? Underline that, close-mouthed. Now, when you go to an AA meeting and you're sitting down at the table with 6 or 7 other people, and a guy sitting at that table is telling you garbage about everybody in AA, and you select that man to take your 5th step with, you're sick, because you're going to be next. A close-mouthed. I took my 5th step with my sponsor, and my sponsor knew all about my garbage. And when I was sitting at an AA meeting and talking about other people, he would come and put his hand behind his ear like this. You know what he was intimating? You know what he was saying to me? I, who know all the garbage about you, are listening to you talk about somebody else's garbage. And I would see that and I would shut up immediately. He put me in my place just by doing this. I don't come to AA to hear your garbage. I don't come to AA to sit down across the table and listen to somebody criticize and become negative and tell me stories about somebody else, especially the girls. I'm sitting down at meetings, I heard a guy, oh, I know that girl, man. She does this, she does. Of course she does. He's the alcoholic. That goes along with it. Oh, I know this guy. He did this, he does it. Sure he did. But when he comes into AA, we expect something different. And that's why probably if there's anybody who disturbs me the most in this program, it's 13-steppers. They come in here and they use this program and they prey upon other people. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives and our parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves but always considerate of others. And while I'm thinking about it, I might as well bring this out also. You do not go to an AA meeting, especially an open AA meeting, and stand up behind this podium and take a fifth step. You don't know who's there. If you read the definitions of an open meeting, you will find out that everybody is welcome, even people who are not alcoholic. There's people in open meetings who run open meetings who don't understand that. AA conference-approved literature says an open meeting is even open to curiosity seekers. And a guy advertises his meeting as an open meeting and then starts complaining about who's there. The only time you have strictly alcoholics there is when you have a C meeting. Do you know what a C meeting is? Closed for alcoholics only. It's about time we start understanding that there's directions for what's occurring here. A woman stood up before a group, and I know I had been to discussion meetings with her, and she was told time and time again never to reveal openly her past. And when she gave her first lead, I guess she wanted to draw on the sentiment of the people there. And she mentioned the fact that her daughter was not from her present husband, that she was fathered by a person that was never married. She was never married to. They had never told this girl that. She told us at an open meeting in AA. And a fella came home from a meeting, and he went in and said, I didn't know so-and-so child was not from the father that she's living with, from another man she had an affair with. And the boy who went to school with her was in the kitchen, and he heard that. And the next day he went to school and he told this girl something, you know, I heard that your mother was a little loose. He didn't put it in those kinds of words, but that's not your father. They devastated that girl. They devastated that family. They moved from Michigan to Arizona. All because this girl could not believe that you don't take a fifth step at a podium. I don't go to AA to hear your sexual preference. Your sexual preference has nothing to do with your alcoholism. I don't believe there's any such thing as a black alcoholic. I don't believe there's any such thing as a Hispanic alcoholic. I don't believe there's any such thing as a young alcoholic. I don't believe there's such a thing as an old alcoholic. I don't believe there's such a thing as a gay alcoholic. They don't say a gay diabetic, or a black diabetic, or a Hispanic diabetic, or a female diabetic. They say diabetes. He suffers from diabetes. But for some strange reason, we have a disease, and we come in here and try to break it down into categories. It's not so. A disease is a disease. What do we say? Alcoholism is respecter of no race, color, creed, religion, condition, or anything else. Why are we saying that? Because it's not so? And now we got specialty groups. Oh, specialty groups. Young people groups. What does a young people suffer from that an old person doesn't suffer from in alcoholism? You got some secret formula? You suffer from alcoholism. Can't metabolize alcohol with a can't quit obsession. See, these things are going way out of whack, and that's because people don't understand the disease. That's what we have to get back to. This is an illness. It's not a psychological matter. Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be one is so situated that there is no suitable person available. If that is so, the step may be postponed only. However, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through with it at the first opportunity. We say this because we are very anxious that we talk to the right person. It is important that we be able to keep a confidence that he fully understands and approve what we are driving at. that he will not try to change our plan. But we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. You took a third step this morning. It tells you immediately you go into a fourth step. When you do your fourth step, as soon as you find somebody to do it, you're going into a fifth step. That's AA's directions. That may not be the fellowship's directions, but that is the founders of the program suggestions, and I give them more weight and authority than any Johnny-come-lately in this program. We have a written inventory, and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we are about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. When a man asks me to do a fifth step with him, I say, yes, I'll be right back. And I go someplace where I can be alone, and I try to condition myself with God to be ready to accept this. That's what I do personally, because I still yet consider it an honor and a privilege to be asked to do a fifth step with someone. And I've done thousands. I figure roughly over 3,000 fifth steps I've done. While I'm in a treatment center, I have a chance and opportunity to do more. I used to average 7, 8 a week when I was in Cleveland. We pocket our pride and go to it illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, it's telling you don't hold anything back in that fifth step. We are delighted. Here come some more promises. Now you're going to get the promises from the fifth step. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. We had promises from the third step, now we got promises from the fifth step. Returning home, evidently we took this down a Jesuit retreat house, I guess, because we're returning home now. We find a place where we begin quiet for how long? An hour. Within the last couple of years, I can't remember exactly, I heard a man stand up and he was leading an AA meeting. He says, I haven't done all the steps. I've been on the sixth step for about 7 months now. 7 months on the fifth step? Well, the guy must have been more rotten than me. You know? Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. And you don't have to time it and sit there exactly for an hour. Carefully reviewing what we have done. In other words, the first 5 proposals. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Page 60, isn't it? 59. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything. We're reviewing what we have done, the first 5 proposals. Have we omitted anything in there? For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? In other words, did we do it to the best of our ability? Are the stones properly in place? Did we build a good foundation? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Willingness. Have we tried to make mortar without sand? In other words, have we tried to hold things to ourselves and not let release everything? Look what it asks on the next page. If we can answer to our satisfaction, that means yes, We have done the first 5 to the best of our ability today. We then look at step 6 after an hour. Not after 7 months, after an hour. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. What is step 6? We're entirely willing to have God remove all these defects. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all things which we have admitted are objectionable? That's a question. Get this underlined. Step 6, are we now ready to let God remove from us all things which we have admitted are objectionable? That's a question. Can He now take them all, every one? That's a question. Now, underline this. If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. In other words, if there's some defect of character we're hanging on to, and we can't let it go, we ask God to help us be willing. How do we ask God to be willing? Just like this. When ready, we say something like this. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. In an hour, you've done step 6 and 7. Now, where are you coming to AA and getting all this business about 1 step a month, 1 step a year? You haven't been on the first step long enough to do the rest steps. That is unadulterated BS. I'm trying to keep it clean because of our location. But sometimes I get carried away. This is why people are going astray in AA and our recovery rates are dropping. Because you have too many intimidators down here who are able to intimidate you and tell you that what you're doing, even though it's proper, is not right. Stay away from them, I wholeheartedly recommend to you. You have the directions and you have the fellowship and the people necessary for you to develop a whole new way of life. Hang on to those. Now, steps 8 and 9 are going to ask us to do our part about it. They're telling us we need a little more action. This is the part that probably separates an awful lot of the men from the boys and the girls from the women in AA. It's the restitution part of the program. We have then completed step 7. That's where we closed off yesterday. Now we have more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. Where did we get that list? We made it when we took inventory. Now, how many of you have been to programs where they tell you after you do your 5th step, burn your 4th step? Take it, flush it down the toilet, get rid of it, it's out of your life. Any of you ever been told that? Sure, a lot of people have. And that's people who come to conclusions in their head as to what you're supposed to do in this program instead of reading the directions. There's another case of it. See, somebody decided they were going to do something dramatic and make it like it's an ending. It's not an ending, because we have to make restitution, and we're going to use this list to help us. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We're going to start repairing the damage we have done to other people. We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. What does that mean, we ask until it comes? Pray about it. And one easy way to make amends is do the ones first that you're willing to make, that the ones you can do the easiest. The ones that become a little more complicated, pray about them. And if you're sincere about your program of recovery, you're going to get such a good feeling about the amends that you do make, you're going to want to go through all of them. And it's It may take you a long time to make your amends, but that still puts you in a daily program. There's no time frame. I can tell you something like this. My financial amends took me 12 years. About 12 years to make all my financial amends. What did that mean? If I couldn't make all my amends, that my program stopped, it ceased, I couldn't do anything until all my amends? If you look at the 9th step, it says, made direct amends wherever possible, not whenever possible. Just that one word throws an awful lot of people off. So when you look at the steps, you see it says wherever, not whenever. So we're gonna try to make amends here, and we're gonna become willing to do it. How many people who are unwilling to make amends for the damage that they have done? I run across very few. When a person becomes sincere about his sobriety and this new way of life, and he's enthusiastic about it, everything falls into place for him. And strange as it may seem, the sicker the person is, the more willing they become. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Who made that agreement? We did when we went for help. Now we're going to start off now in the same sequence that we did our 4th step. The first amends this book is going to deal with are the resentments. Then we're going to deal with the fears, and then it's going to go into the sexual conduct. So now we start off with dealing with the amends of resentments. Probably there are still some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. At the moment we are trying to put our lives in order. But this is not an end in itself. Underline this. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and to people about us. And if you ever hear a speaker in AA talking about, my priorities in a program have now become God, my fellow man, and me, got that right out of the big book. We just read it. But this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Again, exactly what we've been speaking about for 3 days in the recovery process. If we want to recover, our lives become a life of service, not of getting, but of giving. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce we have gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. He is going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. In other words, we don't want to get in the amends process too early talking about God and bringing spirituality in my life. We want to generate goodwill by saying, look, I've offended you maybe verbally some way down the line, and I want to tell you that a lot of it was alcohol. And instead of going into the steps and telling them why we're doing it, eventually they may ask us this, but keep it on a lighter approach in the beginning, especially if you haven't a long record of sobriety yet. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, we are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. Supposing you go to overcome a resentment and the man says, gee, you're doing about the same thing that we do in our church, and that's part of our program in church or something else. You can say then maybe he opens up the door, yes, our program deals with God also. It's designed maybe to get us back to our church. You see how you can play it by ear there? The door will open up. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be he has done us more harm than we have done him, and though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. You know where most of my amends were made when I really got into this program? Right in AA. The people that I was seeing regularly. I assassinated a lot of personalities in here. I hurt a lot of people verbally. And I went to some people and I said, you know, I was telling you one time some things about John, they weren't true. I want to apologize for lying to you about John. And some of the people would say, we knew that when you were telling them, you know. And I would go to John and I would say, you know, John, I didn't like you in a program. I told a lot of lies about you. And, well, why did you do that, Bill? And I would tell him I had a resentment towards you. See? This is what this thing is all about. It's not just going to sit down and hear a speaker. And I don't know if you've experienced it yet or not. Evidently you haven't because you're fairly new in treatment. But when we start going through this process, something happens to us internally. There's the big change that's going to come about in us internally. Not head knowledge, experience-wise. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply we tell him we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. Well, there's your fifth warning. We will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. That's your fifth warning. These are the symptoms of relapse that AA has. And maybe what I'll do is I'll put them down on paper, or the 7 or 8 or 9 warnings that are there, and have the office make a copy of them. And you can take them with you. And then in your own program, you can see if you're going through any of the symptoms of relapse, you'll have them before you. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own faults, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. In other words, the action here is to satisfy our needs, no matter what the outcome may be. And strange as it may seem, it says maybe 9 out of 10 cases are good, 1 case is bad, where we try to make amends. Most leads talk about the one time that they were thrown out of office, like they really had a rough time at it. I found out when I got honest about this program and I went about making amends to the people I'd hurt, you know, some of them were so happy I was drinking, anything I said they accepted. You know, people know what's happening to us. Everybody about us knows what's happening to us. I rode in an automobile with some people and my program started changing. And they would say, well, you know, Joe, he's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. They tell me all the garbage about him. And then at the end, they would end up and say, well, we can't say too much about him because he's sober, isn't he? But they've already poisoned my mind. They've told me all the garbage, and then they say, well, we can't say too much about him because he's sober. Be careful of that kind of conversation. If people start poisoning you about other people, try to stay away from that. I'll give you a good example. I led a meeting one time in Avon, and this is before God became a part of my life. And there was a certain man that was a topic of conversation repeatedly in AA. And somebody pointed him out to me that night. And I knew everything about this man. And I led my meeting, and I put him on a spot. I could see him squirming. He knew exactly who I was talking about. And after the meeting, everybody came up to me and said, boy, you sure gave it to so-and-so tonight, didn't you? I said, I sure gave it to him tonight. You know, and I went home that night and I was laying in bed and I was thinking to myself, you fool you. If they had not pointed him out, you would not have even known he was there. I led a meeting about a man that I knew nothing about, just gossip and criticism and negative statements. You ever have that happen in your life? That's the kind of things we want to clean up. It's a simple little thing. But I've learned since then, if you can't say something good about somebody, don't say anything at all. And your life gets a lot more happy. That's what they deal with, resentments. Now we're going to go into the fears part. And the fears part in this book are going to deal with money and actions that may have been dishonest. Starting with this, most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we are trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. There's your sixth warning. If you don't pay back your debts and overcome your fear with your creditors, you won't stay sober. And I can attest to that. When I first sobered up in this program, I didn't pay anybody back. I ran with a guy who told me, you take care of number one first. If you don't take care of number one, nobody else will. That's the type of philosophy I was living by. The most difficult thing there was for me to do in my life was to open up my wallet and take my money and start paying back my bills, paying back for my bills. I was sober 27 months one time before I got drunk. And during that 27 months, I paid nobody any money back, but I bought a new car. I drove it around, honked the horn at everybody, and showed everybody what AA was doing for me. Material gain. Didn't keep me sober. The sixth warning, we must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. I sat down in a rehab unit that's pretty popular in the Cleveland area. And I was servicing steel mills at the time. I was a salesman. And during the lunchtime, I stopped over to this unit. And while I was there, I heard a fellow in a silk suit talking to another man across the table. And he said, go down to the courthouse and file chapter so-and-so, and you won't have to pay them back any money, file bankruptcy, and they can all... you can wave goodbye to them all. And I said to the man, I said, are you in the AA program? He said, yes. Why, I said, who told you that? He said, what do you mean? I said, I was always told when I came into AA, you make every effort to pay back your bills. He said, that's the way they used to do it. And I said, well, it hasn't changed since I've been around here. So, you know, don't look for the softer, easier way. Sometimes it's the most complicated way. And of course, if you have a wife and family, it'll tell you this. You can't be grandiose and start paying everybody back, and then you can't pay your own bills and your rent and your food supplies. You have to use some common sense. But there may be some things you do recreationally that you can cut out to have some money to spend. I told... I can't remember if this group or not, I gave up smoking cigarettes to put something in a basket. That was my contribution. Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we are sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we are divorced and have remarried but haven't kept up all the money to number one. And here it's listed as alimony. I call it all the money. She is indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. This is a common form of trouble too. I went through that. I can tell you exactly what happened. And they threatened me with another year in jail for non-support. And you know, I was making my support payments out to my children, and I resented it. And I went to see my sponsor. My God was becoming a part of my program now. And I told him, I said, Dan, every week I have to make this check out. I get a resentment. I'm fighting off booze. Every week I got to do this. He says, that's because you were ordered to do it. Put an extra fin in there on your own and don't even have it recorded. And I jumped up from the chair and I said, didn't you hear what I said? He said, you were ordered to pay it. Give a little something on your own. And I started throwing an additional $5 in there. And I'd like to tell you immediately it went away. It did not. But after a couple of months, I started feeling pride in myself for doing this. And you know what? Other things started changing. My job improved. I made more money. I don't know if that was the cause of it, but I sure didn't plan it. I was telling somebody the other day, you know, there's laws of gravity, there's laws of electricity, there's laws of hydraulics, and there's also spiritual laws. We choose to believe all the other laws, but we negate the spiritual laws. And I'm a firm believer there are spiritual laws. If you follow them, things happen for the best. Although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. How do you ask again? Prayer. So you're praying for a specific issue there. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried. Because of resentment and drinking, he had not paid all the money to his wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life, had secured a position, and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. We suggested he write his first wife admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course she did not, and the whole situation has long since been adjusted. I want to tell you something about support payments today. You won't get away from them. They'll follow you wherever you go. And if you ever get any income, your Social Security number is registered, and they're going to snag you. The best advice I have to anyone is if you have problems with support payments, contact the court or something and immediately make a gesture to pay it, because they're picking up guys left and right anymore. The best thing to do is, if you're obligated to pay, pay. You can't get away from it. There's been a transformation in the court system. They have a whole bureau now, support bureau, that's out looking for people who have not made payments. And if you get any kind of a job or anything else, they'll come right down there and snag it. So be careful. Before taking drastic action which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, and asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. Give you another example. There was a fellow that I know who worked for the steel company, and he worked in what's known as the wire gang, and he and two others had been stealing cable, copper cable, from the steel mill. So he came into the program and he sobered up and he wanted to make restitution, and he went in and he saw the general foreman and he said, Me, and he mentioned 2 other fellas, have been stealing copper cable from you, and I figure roughly my share is $2,000. I want to pay you back. He couldn't understand why the other 2 fellas got angry. You know, you don't want to implicate other people. How could he have done this? He could have gone back and said, I have been stealing copper cable and I wanted to pay you. If he didn't want to implicate him, the restitution is the important part. He could have made a money order out to United States Steel Corporation. You don't have to endorse it. It's valid without a signature as long as the corporation is listed. He could have sent the $2,000 there. The restitution is important. But be careful you don't implicate other people in your amends process. That's what they're talking about. You can't drag other people in this because you're willing to sacrifice part of your life. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. All right? In the rehab program that I did in Cleveland, I know of 3 fellas after treatment who took themselves to court and turned themselves in for charges that they had committed, crimes they had committed. I don't remember if there was warrants on them yet or not, but they turned themselves in for the crimes. All 3 were sent to institutions. All 3 are sober yet today. One of them started a business, an electrical company. He's doing very well at it. One went back to Pittsburgh, his hometown. But you know what they said? They got into this program. They accepted a power greater than themselves. They believed in it. They wanted the slate wiped clean. They didn't want to go through sobriety with the fear that next year or 2 years or 3 years down the line somebody was going to come and snag them. I'm not telling everybody go to prison, but I'm telling you, if there's things that may create fears in you, it's better to have the fear relieved. All right? Only you can make that decision. Now we're going to go into the sexual conduct. The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if in this respect alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. We doubt if in this respect alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. In other words, they're saying, again, what I have said. Whatever defects of character we demonstrate in this program, the general population has them also. Alcoholism is not a matter of defects of character. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? The husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. He is having a secret and exciting affair with a girl who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who was literally gone through hell for him. We heard that the other night. There's a lot of examples like that. On most podiums, when I came into AA, they used to have a quote up there that said, "No alcoholic could ever take what he dished out." That's true. I know a lot of fellas chased women, found out one time their wife went out and that was the end. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Can't understand that. They're talking about the wife gets worn out. I used to be in domestic relations court, divorce reconciliation department. And when I was there, I would bring prospective divorcees in. And I would say to the man, I would say, "Gee, why are you divorcing your wife? She's such an attractive woman." "She's frigid." "Frigid?" Yeah. So we have a little conversation. I go to certain details, and then in would come the wife, and I'd say, "One of the reasons your husband says this divorce is occurring is because you're frigid." This one woman in particular thought for a while, and she said, "You know, he's probably right. Do you know what it is like to be sleeping in bed at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning and have him come home drunk? He hasn't brushed his teeth all day. He's been eating blind robins and hard-boiled eggs. And he's got that sour breath, and he shakes me. And then he tries to make love to me." She says, "That's what I associate with the sexual act, that terrific bad breath." The Elkie doesn't know that when he's in his cups. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know he's offending anybody, does he? See, so there's some reasoning behind some of the things that happen in our, there's some logic behind what happens in our domestic life. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing it shall not be repeated. More than that we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this the best course to take. In a general way, you know, there's some things that have occurred in our marriage that may affect the trust level if you knew all about them, but I want to tell you that now that I'm sober, nothing is going to occur like that again. I want our relationship to be a good relationship, a general review. You don't have to start mentioning Mary Jane and Helen, and then like most guys, they brag, they add 10 more onto it, like they were in demand. It says, our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. What do they mean our way of living is not a one-way street? The steps, the program. We're going to bring that out in the chapters before we complete the book. If we can forget, so can she. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy, or he. You know, we have female alcoholics today. A high percentage. I think something like 35% of the alcoholic population anymore are females. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. You know your spouse better than any sponsor or anybody else. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Keep always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalmanship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than face-to-face combat. If we have no such complications, there's plenty we should do at home. If we don't have any complications with sexual issues at home or unfaithfulness or anything else like that, it's telling us there's plenty we can do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. I hear that repeatedly in AA. I came in here not to drink. As long as I don't drink, that's all right. Let's hear what the founders say about that. Certainly he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, would perhaps be dead. I sat in a bar room one evening, and I was drinking with a man, a very gentle man. And you know, I wasn't too gentle in a bar room. I was known as the barroom bully, I guess you call it. Always in fights. And as I drank with this man, I thought to myself, why can't I be a gentleman like him when he drinks? The barmaid would come by and he said, may I have another drink, please? He's paying for it. Would you pass me the salt shaker, please? Would you give me a bag of potato chips, please? And he was so pleasant. You know how I got. So one night I was short of bucks or something, but I wasn't drinking so heavy. And the bar closed about 3:30 in the morning on daylight savings time. And he said, Bill, how would you like to come over for breakfast? Gee, I would enjoy that. And I left the bar room, and we weren't too far from home, and we walked to his home, and the screen door was hooked. You know how they had those little hooks that went in there? And there was no key for the door. And he stopped at the door, and he picked his foot up, and he kicked the screen door in, and he put his hand in there, and he opened up that latch, and he went through the hallway screaming, oh, I won't use the language, telling his wife to get out of bed. He brought a friend over and start cooking breakfast. And I was embarrassed. I was halfway sober, you know, and I sit down and think, my God, out there with people that he's paying everything for, he's so polite, and here he is home with his family, and look how he's treating them. And I remember the little kid coming in the hallway, and he's looking and get your butt to bed too, you know. I want to talk to you, I'll tell you what I want to. And I'm sitting down and thinking, I don't act like that at home. You see the difference? Sometimes, you know, when this book says we are very much the actor, oh boy, well, be careful of the role you play. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. Underline this. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. We feel that a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. And when you're sitting down at an AA meeting and you hear a guy say, all I came in here was for sobriety, you just tell him, yes, the big book writes about you. The founders say, we believe you're unthinking when you say that sobriety is enough. He is like the farmer who came out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife he remarked, don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing? What did the fellow say the other night? I quit drinking, everything's fine. Failing to understand the damage we have done in the home. To the parents, to the brothers. My brother came over one day and said to me, why don't you change your name? I'm sick and tired of people asking me if you're my brother. Why don't you change your name? I'm proud of mine. I'm making headlines. You know, there used to be a restaurant, Do Drop In. Article says, man does drop in. Right through the window I went. Drunk. I get front page for that. I can go on in what was happening in my life as a result of alcohol. And all I had to do was quit drinking and accept this way of life, and it's gotten better. I tell an awful lot of people, did you thank God for your addiction? If it wasn't for your addiction, you would never had a chance to meet me. Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. Who does the reconstruction? Not the family. We take the lead. Just read the black print. It's telling you what's necessary here. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. Now this next line is, I'll bet you 99% of the alcoholic population in AA does not know it's there. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. How many of you people been in AA before? 90% of you? How many of you ever sat down with the family and analyzed the past as we now see it? No one. People don't know about the rehabilitation process in this book. Exactly where we started the rehab with resentments, sexual conduct, and fears. And now it's telling us make amends. All of this is done for the healing process to overcome our addiction. Being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. Show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. That's a prayer. This program is loaded with prayer, but people are not aware of it when they're reading it. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. See how important that is again? Bill got nervous when he wrote it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. This is very important. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. And there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. Most AAs have picked that up, and when they lead, they stand up before a group and they say, but we don't have to be used for a doormat. You ever hear that? Mm-hmm. And I used to do it publicly. Now I come up to them after the meeting and I would say, would you give me one example where you allowed anybody to ever use you for a doormat? As if by becoming humble and doing what's necessary, we're going to be used as a doormat. Nobody has ever used me for a doormat, but I have used several other people. Okay? Don't allow the impression that if you do these things, you're going to become a doormat. You're going to become spiritually strong. Some amends cannot be made. I told you people I was in an accident, 2 people were killed, and one of the persons was in my car. Now there's no possible way I could have gone to that family and thing. They were very disturbed with me. And not too long ago, I had a call for help from a woman. And they had no place to put this other girl who needed help. And I had some friends and we got together and we got her placed into a local detox unit. We paid for it. And after the local detox unit, she got into a female rehab unit and stayed there for about 70 days. and she was in the program. She went back home. And one day I was leading an anniversary, and she came there with her husband, and they were sitting down in a group, and there was another fella sitting there with her. And at the end of the meeting, this is just in the last 5 months, at the end of the meeting, the man came up to me and he shook my hand and he said, "December 21st, 1956, I hated your guts. I could have killed you." And I said, "Why?" He said, "I'm Joey's brother." I said, "Joey who?" And here it was the man that was in the car with me. He said, "You know, I had an awful lot of hate toward you." He said, "But that's my daughter. You saved her life." There's no possible way but through AA that could have ever occurred. All right? If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Those are the 12 steps, the 12 promises that everyone speaks about in AA. Yet we found out there's more than 12 promises. We had promises after the 3rd step, promises after the 5th step, promises after the 9th step, and you're going to find more promises yet. All right? Now, for an individual who comes in here and listens to some of the misinformation, you may fall by the wayside because you won't go through this process. You notice the promises that we record so often and speak about in AA occur after the 9th step. And the 9th step says we may direct amends wherever possible. If we are painstaking about this phase of our program, the only part of the program that they speak about being painful is the direct amends. Because the most pain that we can have is we have to open up our wallet and pay back. That's painful to alcoholics, believe me. I'm not kidding you. It's difficult to do. There were many times I would like to pass that up. But I sat down at a meeting and a man said to me one day, he said, "You don't have to make direct amends." I said, "You don't?" He said, "No. You stay sober one day at a time and live different, and you'll be making living amends." So now the 9 steps should read, "Made living amends wherever possible," right? It doesn't say that. It said we made direct amends, and the reason it says direct amends because there's a reason for that. Those promises start occurring. Now, for an individual who comes in here and says, "All I came in here for was to quit drinking alcohol and not drinking is enough," there's nothing wrong with that. As long as he doesn't drink, I'm happy for him. If people quit drinking without AA, I'm happy for them. I don't make judgments on them and say, "Well, they're not happy." I met some people in AA I'd like to give $10 to. Here, man, go get it out of your system, you know? But let's look at this. If a man works for minimum wage, what is minimum wage? About $4.65 an hour? $4.65 an hour. Let's use that arbitrary figure. Now, you can't say he's unemployed, can you? Because he's working for minimum wage. Now, if that man is satisfied with minimum wage, that's his prerogative. If he's satisfied with $4.65 an hour, great. But supposing now he was offered a job with all the fringe benefits. Paid insurance, paid hospitalization, expense account, automobile, a stock ownership program, pension plan, sick day policy, investments. He would be foolish to refuse that, wouldn't he? What would you think if you was working for $4.65 an hour and you heard that your buddy working on a job was offered a position that paid all these fringe benefits and then increases, and he turned it down? What would you think? The guy must be goofy. That's exactly the way I refer to an individual who says, I'm satisfied with not drinking. He doesn't get any of the fringe benefits. He's passing the whole package up and staying down there at the very bottom. Not drinking is not the ending. We hear this repeatedly. Not drinking is but the beginning. The beginning of what? The beginning of working a whole new process to live by. We must not drink to work the program. Now we're coming to the part of the program that a lot of people refer to as the maintenance steps and such, and I don't know if they're maintenance steps. I consider them myself personally growth steps because that's the words that's used in there. But what have we covered so far? You find out that we've gone from the admission that we're powerless, our lives have become unmanageable, we need a power greater than ourselves, and we made a decision in step 3 to bring this power into our lives, and we started going through a process to clear the way for this. Now, a person said to me yesterday, you mean if I go through the steps and I get this done, then I won't drink anymore? There's no guarantee that because you went through the steps you're never going to drink again, unless you maintain your spiritual condition. So a lot of people think that because they have a spiritual experience or awakening, they'll never drink alcohol again, are mistaken. You must maintain a fit spiritual condition to abstain from alcohol. And if you notice the symptoms of relapse that are there, if you haven't fulfilled those obligations and you don't continue watching for resentment, self-pity, and fear, alcohol come back into your life again because you're not fit spiritually. If you start doing things that are contrary to God's laws, you're not living spiritually. If you're trying to find God in your life changes and becomes a cleaner life. That's all I can tell you. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. What have I just stated in those 3 or 4 lines? A 2-part proposition. Did you dig the 2 parts out of it? This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and put above that and also. And if you read it, and as a conjunction which means also, it would read, this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory, also continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. It's making a distinction here. It's telling you we're continuing our 4th step inventory, which the 12 and 12 states is the beginning of a lifelong process. All right? Now, some people, in the beginning, if you're doing these steps early in your program, I mentioned yesterday, you'll do a 4th step and a 5th step to the best of your ability and go on from there. But you're surely, as you grow spiritually and your life changes, you're going to find out that there's areas that you overlooked. And if there's areas that you overlooked, you're going to continually do your 4th step to improve upon it. You can't stay sober to do your 4th and 5th perfectly. You'll never do it perfectly. I don't think you can do it any better than I did. And I tried very hard to be perfect. It's not possible. This is a growing process. Look at what the next words say. Let's read those once more. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. That's telling you daily also. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. What's that? The 3rd step. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. In other words, we have just entered the world of the spiritual. Now we're going to grow in understanding and effectiveness by constantly practicing it. Now look at what the 9th step contains. We just covered the 3rd step. We have entered the world of the Spirit. That's 3. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. And it tells us what? This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. To grow in understanding and effectiveness, it should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. What's that? Step 4, inventory. When these crop up, we ask God to remove at once to remove them. Step 6 and 7. We discuss them with someone immediately. Step 5. And make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Steps 8 and 9. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Step 12. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Step 11. In one paragraph, you have redone, recompleted the first 9 steps. Step 10 is a continuation of the first 9. And if you start practicing the first 9, you're also going to include in there now your daily steps for inventory, which will take place in the 11th step, and it's going to be a surprise to a lot of people, but I'll show it to you. And you're going to go into 12-step work. What are going to be the results? Did you hear so much of the 12 promises in step 9? We told you promises is 3, promises of 5, promises of 9. Now this next paragraph you can read, it can either be promises, but as I was reading them as promises, a man sitting down at one of the big book weekends said, "Bill, that sounds like the recovered to me." By God, I looked at it, and yes, they're explaining how we are recovered. And here comes the explanation of when we are recovered in AA, and it comes after a continuation of working these steps daily in our lives. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. It's telling you that if you work these steps daily, you're not going to be fighting alcohol anymore. Isn't that a release? For by this time sanity will have returned. Now let's look at this. Sanity will have returned. How does sanity return? By working through the steps. By making a decision, an inventory, a 5th step, a prayer to have defects removed, making amends, we're restored to sanity. Yet a lot of people say in AA, they say, it says God could restore you to sanity. It doesn't say it would. Did you ever hear that? I hear it repeatedly. That person's passing off misinformation lightly. It tells me right here, for by this time sanity will have returned. Not just by making the 2nd step, but by going through the whole process. Then sanity will occur. We will seldom be interested in liquor. It's telling us we're not even going to be interested in liquor. Do you know when I came into this program, I spent more time fighting booze than I did anything else? If I go here, if I drink, if I do this, will I drink? I became aware of television ads, newspaper ads, magazine ads, billboards, heard drunkalogs. That's all I did. I kept thinking about alcohol. My mind was saturated with thoughts of alcohol. I don't have those anymore. That's a release in itself right there. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. That's release. We react sanely and normally and find that this has happened automatically. We react sanely and normally. We're not reacting in fear with alcohol anymore. I don't want to come to AA meetings and live in fear. I don't want to come to AA meetings and have somebody coming to me constantly talking to me about you got to be fearful of getting drunk. If I had to come in here and live in fear, I would have been out a long time ago. I am offered hope in this program, that a hope that through a spiritual experience I'll be released from all these complications with alcohol. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes, that is the miracle of it. Our new attitude toward liquor, it's a miracle, our new attitude. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. That's happened. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in what? Fit spiritual condition. There's recovered. Now, if you want to go back through the things that I said and number them, you have about 12 more promises in there, if you want to call them 12 more promises. The first one is, for by this we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. That's 1. For by this time sanity will have returned. That's 2. We will seldom be interested in liquor. That's 3. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. That's 4. We react sanely and normally and find this has happened automatically. That's 5. We will see our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's 6. That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. That's 7. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. That's 8. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been, we have not even sworn off. That's 9. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. That's 10. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That's 11. That is our experience. This is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. That's 12. There's 12 more promises after the 10th step. See, so I say this program is loaded. The potential for our life and our lifestyle so vastly changes in here as a result of spirituality that when we read this book, it seems as if it's so deep we can't comprehend what's occurring. And that's why we started big book discussions that take us page by page, line by line, to become involved in the black print. You know where most people have problems in this program? They don't stick with the black print. What do they read? The white spaces in between, and they insert their own ideas. Each line in this book takes you to the next line. If you don't know what you're reading, look at the questions on a page. Write the questions down. The questions that are asked will be answered. And that's what's meant in there when it says all your questions are answered in the big book. It doesn't mean your own personal questions. Should I buy an Oldsmobile or a Ford? Should I take X-Lax or Kaopectate or all this kind of stuff? That's not the kind of questions. So somebody misinterpreted all your questions are answered in the big book. They thought they meant my personal questions. No, all your questions asked in the big book are answered. That's what that means. Now, it says it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. You know what that means? Sit on your tush and just don't do nothing. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. In other words, it's telling you can't let up on your spiritual action. We are not cured of alcoholism. Recovered does not mean you're cured. It means that you're not going through all them conditions we just talked about. Sanity will have returned. You won't be fighting it. The drink problem will be taken away. That's recovered. But you're not cured. You put any alcohol back in your system and you're going to get drunk or more than drunk. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. A vision of God's will. Here's how we come to it. How can I best serve Thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. What is the proper use of the will? Just covered. You see how you can hear something and not grasp it? Thy will, not my will, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our will along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. In other words, saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will, not my will, be done. These are thoughts which we can use constantly. Thy will, not my will, be done. Now, a lot of people come into the program, they go through the steps, they're enthusiastic, and early in the program they will continue doing their first 9 steps. And then eventually they become second nature to you. You find out that you don't formally have to do it on paper anymore. But in the beginning, people usually keep doing it on paper. And after a year or 2 years or 3 years, you find out it just becomes a natural part of your living day. But there are some groups, and I read this in the 12 and 12, and Bill Wilson writes about it, who schedule twice a year, every 6 months, to do a formal rewritten 4th and 5th. It doesn't matter how you do it as long as you continue doing it. If you're growing spiritually daily, that's good. But don't rest on your laurels and stop and come to a certain plateau, because then you're coasting. Do you know the only way you can coast? How's the only way you can coast? Downhill. Don't start coasting, because that's downhill. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed what? Suggestions? Directions. The steps are not called suggestions here, they're called directions. They were called ideas. They were called a plan of action. They were called directions. But all anybody ever remembers who wants to be a rebel in there, the steps are only suggested. That's the only word they remember. That's the rebellious part, the nature of the alcoholic. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become what? God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital 6th sense. What's the vital 6th sense? God consciousness. But we must go further, and that means more action. In other words, the admission of being powerless, all right? The acceptance of a power greater than ourselves, the decision to do